is CJ Jackson. While its luster has faded over the years, the Intercontinental title was once known as the workhorse belt within WWE, often held by the best wrestlers of their day, such as Randy Savage or Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. Cody had grown up idolizing those very performers, so getting a chance to hold that same belt himself almost meant more to him than winning the WWE title would have. He even went as far as to successfully lobby the company to bring back the classic 1980s white strap design of the title, something which delighted many old-school fans at the time. During this time, he also ended his allegiance with Ted DiBiase when the two
Another
briefly feuded
Godfather,
over the
dude.
IC
Really?
belt. After this, Cody once again found himself in a program with Randy Orton, though this time he was far closer to Orton in terms of position on the card than he had been before. He even managed to get a win over his former mentor on the September 12th edition of Raw, solidifying this. From there, the title reign continued as Cody dropped the mask and took on all comers, including the likes of John Morrison and Booker T, before losing the belt to the Big Show at WrestleMania 27, ending things at an impressive 233 days. His next notable program after this was when he teamed with Damien Sandow in September 2012 to form the Rhodes Scholars, with the two vowing to win the tag team titles. Despite numerous attempts, however, they were never able to capture the goal, and in early 2013 they mutually agreed to dissolve the team, but remain best friends, giving audiences a rare amicable tag team split. They would be briefly reunited after this, but were never able to make it to the heights they had ambitions for, even getting cut from that year's WrestleMania card due to time constraints. Later that year, a feud eventually developed between the two after Sandow had cost Rhodes the Money in the Bank contract so he could win it for himself. This led to Cody's first babyface turn since 2008, and a pretty lackluster series of matches, to be honest, where the highlight was probably Rhodes throwing his former teammate's Money in the Bank contract into the Gulf of Mexico. It seemed by this point, Cody's progress was stalling, and while he had hoped to be a main event force, he was forever stuck in an upper mid-card role. Despite this, he would soon reach his creative peak in WWE when a story began with him getting kayfabe fired from the company after standing up to Triple H and the Authority. This firing served more than just as a storyline purpose, as it turned out. It gave Rhodes time to go on his honeymoon with backstage interviewer Brandy. The two had been dating for some time by that point and had gotten married in September 2013. This allowed them some time to enjoy being newlyweds before being thrown back into the chaos of the wrestling world. On screen, however, the story that had been started with Cody's firing continued when his brother Dustin and father Dusty got involved in an attempt to get him reinstated. After Dusty was attacked by the Big Show, his children decided that they had enough and gate-crashed Raw, taking out the Authority's attack dogs, the Shield, in the process. This led to a match at the 2013 Battleground pay-per-view where the Rhodes brothers were able to defeat Roman Reigns and Seth Rollins and win back their jobs in one of the most emotionally satisfying moments in recent WWE history. They later managed to beat them again, this time with the tag team titles on the line, and would keep those belts until the 2014 Royal Rumble. After the loss, Cody began losing confidence in his abilities and decided it was time to leave the team, going away to rediscover himself in the form of Stardust. This gimmick was clearly a take on his older sibling's Goldust character, and was also a reference to his father's private jet's name back in the 80s. With the union between them strong again, the two brothers would re-team in the summer of 2014, and on August 18th, won the tag team titles once more after beating the Usos. All was well for a while after this, even when they lost the belts at that year's Survivor Series pay-per-view. The two brothers remained on the same page. That would change, however, when Cody turned heel on Dustin on the February 16th, 2016 edition of Raw. Behind the scenes, the two had big plans for the feud and had hoped that they would be able to blow it off at that year's WrestleMania. The company, however, didn't see the potential in this and instead decided to have the match between them take place the month before at Fastlane. Cody was understandably disappointed with this and began to realize that WWE were never going to see him as the big-time star he believed he could be. When his father died on June 11th, 2015, many expected the company to drop the Stardust gimmick and have him revert to a babyface role, given how much sympathy he now had with fans, something which Omega doubled down on the character, turning him into something that more resembled a comic book villain who even got into a feud with Arrow star Stephen Amell, Rhodes and Amell having become friends after he had done a recent guest spot on the show. After this program was over, Cody milled around aimlessly in the mid-card, forming the Cosmic Wasteland with the Ascension and losing to the likes of Apollo Crews and Zack Ryder on TV. On May 21st, 2016, deciding he had had enough, Rhodes announced on Twitter that both he and his wife Brandi had asked for their releases from the company, something which would be granted the following day for him, with Brandi getting hers a few days later. Cody cited frustrations with his position in the company as his main reason for leaving. Cody had negotiated with the writing team to create a Stardust gimmick for over 6 months, and pitched numerous storyline ideas which had all been ignored. He knew he could be more, and now he was intent on proving it. Going by the moniker The American Nightmare, a play on his father's American Dream nickname, he quickly started working on the
Why, man? You got no reason to with me.
Here, the young Rhodes
That's how real. What the heck?
Was more than just empty words, as he filled up his diary with every date he could take. He wrestled the likes of Zack Sabre Jr. and Chris Hero in Evolve, and took on performers like Eddie Edwards and Mike Bennett in TNA. He also took part in PWG's annual Battle of Los Angeles tournament. As well as this, he became a regular member of the Ring of Honor and New Japan Pro Wrestling rosters. It was here he would first meet the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega, with him quickly being invited into their inner circle and joining the Bullet Club. This particular corner of the Bullet Club was by now something of a splinter group, referring to themselves as the Elite. The Elite's numbers also included the likes of Hangman Adam Page and Marty Scurll, and they were becoming something of an internet sensation thanks to their YouTube series being the Elite. In the ring, Cody's stock was rising too, and he was able to challenge Kazuchika Okada for the IWGP Heavyweight title in an impressive effort. However, fractures were beginning to show within the stable, and it wouldn't be long before this turned into out-and-out civil war. During this war, Cody eventually found himself on the opposite side to the group's leader and, at the time, IWGP champion Kenny Omega. The two would briefly feud over the title before being reunited in the face of attacks from the Firing Squad, another fracturing of wrestlers within the increasingly unstable Bullet Club that included King Haku, Tonga Loa, and Tama Tonga. With the Elite reunited, however, Cody went on to win the IWGP United States Championship from Juice Robinson at 2018's Fighting Spirit Unleashed, this marking his first title win in the company. By this point, though, Cody already had his sights set on even greater things. In May 2017, pro wrestling journalist Dave Meltzer has suggested that no independent wrestling show in North America would ever be able to sell out 10,000 seats again. Cody's response to this was simple. Challenge accepted. Initially, most saw it as a lighthearted bantering between the two, but it quickly became apparent that Cody and the Young Bucks along with him were serious. A year later, and they announced All In, with tickets going on sale on May 13th, 2018, and to the surprise of many, selling out in only 30 minutes. It was clear that after years of homogenized WWE product, there was an appetite for an alternative, and Cody and the Bucks had been able to tap into this. Leveraging their online popularity, they were able to draw an audience that few thought was possible. And on September 1st of that year, the show went ahead with Cody becoming the first second-generation NWA champion in history by beating Nick Aldis. While he didn't go on last that night, Cody was clearly the main event to both the live audience and those watching at home, showing just how big of a star he could be. That night, Tony Khan, owner of Fulham FC and the Jacksonville Jaguars, was in attendance. Khan was a lifelong wrestling fan and was hugely impressed with what he had seen, realizing that there was a real opportunity to start a fresh promotion there. With this, all the pieces had fallen perfectly into place. Cody and the Bucks convinced Kenny Omega and Hangman Page to follow them to this new frontier, and on January 1st, All Elite Wrestling was officially announced.
This is why you're always at my house. I downsized my lifestyle to match my internet speed.
Don't cramp your lifestyle. You can live big with Spectrum Internet.
Switch to Spectrum Internet and TV, just $44.99 a month, each one bundle. Switch now.
Imagine you love frosting and filling.
I do love frosting and filling.
Well, imagine if there was a way to enjoy that delicious goodness anywhere, anytime, with nothing but a thin layer of foil between you and us.
At the initial press conference, Cody revealed that he, alongside That day, they were also able to confirm that former WWE champion Chris Jericho was signing with them too, opening up a lot of eyes of people who would dismiss this as nothing more than a vanity project. On May 25th, 2019, at Double or Nothing, the inaugural AEW event, Cody finally got a chance to have the match he had wanted to have with his brother Dustin all those years ago. We've discussed this one in more detail on our Dustin Rhodes video, but the long and short of it is that it was an instant classic that received 5 stars in Dave Meltzer's Wrestling Observer newsletter and proved just how good he was. Before the match, he would even take a symbolic shot at WWE, destroying the throne setup at ringside with a sledgehammer, a clear nod to Triple H. Once AEW's weekly TV show Dynamite began airing, Cody found himself the #1 contender to the company's world title, held at the time by Chris Jericho. The build to that match was classic old-school NWA-style booking, and even had a stipulation added where Rhodes would never be able to challenge for the title again should he lose. And he did end up losing after being screwed over by his teammate best friend, MJF. They would go on to feud after that, a program which peaked with a segment where, in exchange for agreeing to a match, MJF demanded Cody take 10 lashes across the back. It was one of the most emotionally engrossing wrestling segments in years, and arguably the best thing AEW has done to date. You could really feel every strike, and you winced along with each one. When it was all over, you wanted nothing more than to see Cody get his revenge. In a twist in the story, though, he didn't. MJF ended up beating Cody in their long-awaited match at Revolution on February 29th, 2020. While arguably the biggest babyface in the company, Cody was insistent on making sure he didn't dominate the main event scene, and wanted to ensure that other younger talents get put over too, similar to what the Young Bucks were doing in the tag division. He did get his first singles title though, becoming the company's inaugural TNT champion at May 23rd's Double or Nothing pay-per-view. From there, Cody, keen to use this title victory to build new stars, started a weekly open challenge where anyone could compete for the belt, whether they were a member of the AEW roster or not. This led to some interesting indie wrestlers getting TV exposure as they showed up to try and dethrone him. Some of these would even get AEW contracts afterwards and go on to greater success, such as the likes of Eddie Kingston and Ricky Starks. In August 2020, Cody had to leave AEW for a few weeks so as to film a part of the TV show. Before going, he put over Brody Lee as strong as could be done, having him absolutely destroy Rhodes and win the belt in just over 3 minutes, looking like a monster in the process. Cody would return on September 23rd to get his revenge, beating Brody in a dog collar match to once again become the champion. Since then, he's returned to putting the title on the line against young up-and-comers like Orange Cassidy and Darby Allin. At the time of this video's recording, he's still the TNT champion, and it looks like he'll be a stalwart of the company for some time yet, with he and his wife Brandy becoming something of a parallel to Triple H and Stephanie McMahon in fans' eyes. Yes, he's finally proved that he can be a legit main event draw and succeed as the top babyface of a company. All it took in the end was for someone to give him a chance. When fans were allowed in attendance, few got bigger reactions than Cody, and we can't imagine that will be any different once they return. In fact, at this rate, when all is said and done, he might even do what no one thought was possible, and reach even greater...
We have so many opportunities. Once they show that initiative, once they have that passion and express that desire, we can back that up by giving them those opportunities.
One of the biggest criticisms WWE has faced over the years has been their lack of long-term storytelling. All too often, storylines will be dropped out of nowhere, or allegiances that had previously defined characters will go forgotten. It can be frustrating to watch, but that's not to say WWE is always guilty of this. No, in fact, there have been some excellent examples of long-term storytelling during the company's long history, such as Randy Savage and Miss Elizabeth's love story, The Undertaker's WrestleMania streak, and most recently, Randy Orton and Bray Wyatt. One of the best examples of this, though, has kind of fallen in the company's lap, starting way back in 2003, and only now peaking in 2020, Audiences have gotten to see Dominic Mysterio go from innocent child all the way to WWE superstar. It's rare that we get to watch one person grow so much before our eyes, and it really allows us to get invested so much easier. Of course, the men that anchored Dominic in the wrestling world are his father, Rey Mysterio, and the late, great Eddie Guerrero, both of whom have a big part to play in this story, too. Join us today as we take a deep dive into this 15-year-long journey in Who's Your Poppy? The story of Rey Mysterio, Eddie Guerrero, and Dominic. Now, Eddie and Rey's history goes back a long way, of course, way before the birth of Dominic. Both men, being of Mexican heritage, started their careers together in the lucha libre scene south of the border, each working for one of Mexico's two premier wrestling promotions, AAA, from 1992 until they were introduced to American audiences through Paul Heyman's ECW in 1995. From there, they were snapped up by WCW, where they wowed audiences with their innovative, high-flying performances. In fact, the best match of the early part of both men's careers came against each other in an absolute classic at 1997's Halloween Havoc pay-per-view. It goes without saying, then, that the two had great in-ring chemistry, but they were also good friends in real life, something which extended out to their families. In fact, when Dominic Mysterio was born on April 5th, 1997, Eddie was actually chosen to be his godfather, which is slightly ironic given what would later occur on WWE TV. Eddie, of course, was the first to jump to WWE, leaving with Chris Benoit, Dean Malenko, and Perry Saturn in January 2000. Rey didn't come until a couple of years later after the Invasion angle had ended, his debut happening on the July 25th, 2002 edition of SmackDown. A year later, when both men were firmly established as WWE superstars, fans got their first glimpse of the young Dominic, who at only 6 years old, appeared in the audience on the June 5th, 2003 edition of SmackDown, cheering on his father as he captured the Cruiserweight title from Matt Hardy. It's also notable that Dominic's sister Aaliyah was in attendance that night too, given how she has now become an on-screen character on WWE TV herself. That night, after Rey got the victory, his son even joined him in the ring for the celebration. Dominic appeared on screen again on the September 11th edition of SmackDown that same year, watching his father battle Brock Lesnar. At the time, it may have just seemed like a nice little Easter egg to see Mysterio's children in the crowd, but little did fans know this was planting the seeds for a future story. In 2005, Dominic reappeared on WWE TV. However, with him already being established in fans' minds, he was now primed to get involved in one of the wackiest stories in the company's history. Eddie Guerrero and Rey Mysterio had been involved in a slowly building feud since February of that year, with the two friends winning tag team gold together and even having a match against each other at WrestleMania 21. The bout was treated as a friendly exhibition at the time. However, it wouldn't be long before Guerrero turned on Rey, abandoning the man he had once considered his family. After this, Eddie threatened to reveal a long-held Mysterio family secret. This lingering plot thread simmered for a while, as the story expanded outwards with the families of both men getting involved, each begging Guerrero not to reveal what he knew. At the Great American Bash pay-per-view on July 24th, 2005, Rey fought his former brother with the understanding that if he won, the secret would remain as such forever. Rey did win in the end, but in typical lying, cheating, and stealing fashion, Eddie told the world anyway, revealing on the following episode of SmackDown that he was actually the father of Dominic. Yes, Latino Heat told WWE audiences that 8 years before, he and his wife Vicky had been having marital difficulties, leading to him getting another woman pregnant. He also alleged that at the same time, Rey and his wife Angie were having trouble conceiving a child of their own. So Eddie, good friend that he was, allowed them to adopt his bastard son. Yes, it's completely ludicrous even by wrestling standards, and would only get sillier from there. But somehow it ended up becoming a classic storyline, primarily due to the commitment and performances by Rey Mysterio playing the broken father, and Eddie Guerrero playing the cackling villain. Perhaps even more so than them, though, Dominic proved himself in many ways to be the MVP of the program, his facial expressions alone being enough to break fans'